The flight was already delayed and the mood inside the terminal had turned sour. Passengers shuffled restlessly, dragging bags, muttering complaints, and glancing at their watches. When boarding finally began, row numbers were called, and a stream of tired travelers moved toward the gate. In the middle of this routine chaos, a woman in her early 30s, dressed simply in jeans and a navy jacket, slipped quietly into the line. She held nothing more than a duffel bag slung across her shoulder. Her boarding pass read 16C. She walked down the narrow aisle of the aircraft, aware of every sideways glance. Some people looked at her with curiosity, others with irritation. A couple of teenagers snickered as she passed, whispering in tones meant to be overheard. She ignored them. She had gotten used to the stares, the unspoken questions, and the assumptions. By the time she dropped into her seat halfway down the plane, she could already feel the heat of humiliation creeping up the back of her neck. The man in 16B, a businessman in a crisp suit, gave her the briefest nod before turning back to his tablet. Across the aisle, a heavy-set woman shifted uncomfortably, pulling her purse closer as if wary of a stranger. It was always the same, on planes, in restaurants, even in grocery stores. People sized her up, judged her by what she wore, by the quiet way she carried herself, and never once imagined what she had done, or who she had once been. The truth was something she carried deep inside, unspoken and unseen. Years earlier, the world had known her by a different name, her call sign. Back then, it had echoed through radios in the skies, sharp and commanding. Pilots had trusted her voice, ground crews had followed her lead, and entire missions had turned on her decisions. But none of that mattered here. To these strangers, she was just another passenger squeezed into row 16, just another face in the blur of anonymity. She closed her eyes as the plane lifted into the night sky, the engines humming a lullaby of memories she had tried hard to bury. But the past has a way of clawing back, especially when it refuses to be forgotten. It had started in the deserts overseas, where the horizon stretched like fire under a merciless sun. She had been one of the youngest women to earn her wings in her squadron, flying fast jets when few believed she could. The call sign had been given to her half in jest, half in awe, after a mission that should have gone wrong but didn't. It stuck, the way good call signs always do, whispered with a mixture of respect and disbelief. She remembered the first time she rolled her jet over a hostile zone, heart pounding so loud she thought it might drown out the radio. A convoy pinned down below had called for support, voices urgent, lives hanging by a thread. She had been outnumbered, her fuel dangerously low, but she had stayed, weaving through anti-air fire, guiding her wingman with a calm that surprised even herself. When the dust cleared and the convoy rolled to safety, her commander's voice had cracked through the static. Copy that. Call sign, outstanding work. From that moment, she was no longer just another pilot. She was the one they sent when missions looked impossible. The one who flew into storms, both literal and human. The one who carried the weight no one else wanted. Her name became shorthand for courage in the squadron, carved into briefing rooms and remembered in after-action stories. But glory never lasts. Politics, pride, and envy had their own gravity. A single disagreement with the wrong superior officer, a single refusal to bend her principles, and the tide had turned. Rumors spread, doors closed, and her career was quietly dismantled. She hadn't failed in the cockpit, she had been failed by the system outside it. Now sitting in 16C, she felt the echoes of that betrayal every time someone looked at her and saw nothing more than an ordinary woman. They didn't know about the nights she'd flown through tracer fire, or the comrades she'd guided home when everything seemed lost. They didn't know about the call sign that had once made hardened soldiers stand a little taller. She turned her face to the window, where the city lights dwindled beneath the clouds. She told herself it didn't matter anymore. That part of her life was gone. She was just a passenger now, just another seat number, just 16C. But fate had its own plans, and fate, she would soon discover, had a way of saluting those who had once commanded the skies. The turbulence came suddenly, jarring the plane as it crossed into rough weather. Passengers gasped, clutching armrests. A baby cried from somewhere in the back. The captain's calm voice filled the cabin, assuring everyone it was nothing serious, but she felt it instantly. Something wasn't right. Years in the cockpit had given her an instinct sharper than any warning light. Then came the announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a technical issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The businessman beside her paled, gripping his tablet as if it could save him. Around them, whispers grew louder, fear spreading like wildfire. She could feel the tension, the helplessness, and in that moment, the humiliation she had felt minutes earlier dissolved into something else. Purpose. When the flight attendant hurried past, she reached out, her voice low but firm. "I need to speak to the captain. Tell him there's someone on board who understands what he's facing." The attendant blinked, skeptical, but something in her tone carried weight. Minutes later, she was ushered toward the cockpit, eyes of passengers following, confused and desperate. Inside, the pilots were fighting failing instruments and a storm that refused to let go. She scanned the panels, the flashing warnings, the sweat on the captain's brow. Without hesitation, she slid into the jump seat. "I've flown worse," she said simply. For a heartbeat, doubt flickered in the captain's eyes. Then he saw it, the steady gaze of someone who had lived inside the storm before. He nodded. Together, they worked the problem. Her hands moved with remembered precision, her voice steady as she called out adjustments. The call sign returned, not spoken aloud but alive in the way she commanded the moment, in the way the others listened and obeyed without question. The storm broke. The plane leveled, and when they finally touched down, the cabin erupted in applause. Strangers who had once judged her by her seat number now stared in awe. Word spread quickly, as it always does in moments like these. Someone whispered her old call sign, pulled from a news article long forgotten, and soon it was echoing down the aisle like a battle cry reborn. When she stepped off the plane, members of the Air Force who had heard what happened were already waiting at the gate. They didn't look at her with suspicion or dismissal. They saluted, not because of the seat she had been assigned, not because of the clothes she wore, but because of the call sign that had once carried nations through fire. And for the first time in years, she lifted her chin, accepted the salute, and allowed herself to remember who she truly was.